There's no doubt that Supabase greatly enhances your app in all kinds of ways, from architecting to designing to building and all the way to launching. Supabase acts as your best friend and pretty much handles anything you throw at it. At its core, Supabase acts as your app's backend, but it can also do so much more. While we've covered all kinds of nifty things that Supabase can do, and there are plenty, in today's video, I want to go beyond that and show you actual real-world scenarios, situations where regardless of what kind of app you're planning to build, you will need to leverage these techniques for a serious production-ready app. And this is where Supabase truly shines. I'm also pretty certain that by the time you finish watching this video, you'll be implementing a few, if not all, of the techniques I'll be covering today. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps and all the resources that I talk about in this channel can be viewed and or cloned from our amazing Patreon community. And if you're still not a member of our incredible Patreon community, then you're greatly missing out, and you can join via the first link in the description below the video. Now, in order to show you the various techniques that you can easily achieve using Supabase, I went ahead and built a proof of concept app here in Flutterflow. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this app, I'm going to show you the various techniques, and then we're going to jump back into Flutterflow so that I can show you how I actually built this integration. All right, so here's our proof of concept app, and we're gonna go ahead and log in. Now, the first technique that I want to show you is called a soft delete. And the best way to understand it is to look at this scenario that we have here. So this here is a mock email inbox view. Basically, we are looking at all my emails that have been sent to me that I need to take a certain action on, right? So we have the date, we have the subject, we have the body, and we can also delete this email if we do not find it important. So I can click here and I'm presented with this message. Now, if I click quick enough, I can undo this deletion. Okay, so this email comes back here, right? So if I click here, I have this thing. This thing shows up for exactly 5 seconds. If I do not click on it, that email is gone forever. Okay, so now this email that we were just viewing has been deleted permanently. Okay, so if we click here and let's say we want to delete the system maintenance, you see it has been deleted, but we can still undelete it. If I undelete it, it comes back. Okay, if I click this again and I don't do anything in a span of 5 seconds, that email will be gone forever. And the way that we handle this special behavior is by setting up our Supabase table in a specific way. So if we come back here, here's our Supabase dashboard, and here's the table that we are looking at, this emails table. So we have all the standard fields, but we have an extra field called deleted. Okay, and the purpose of this field is to mark something as deleted or not deleted. Okay, so we are never deleting this record, from this database, right? That would be a hard delete. In our case, we are simply marking it as a field, right? So if there's something that we want to be deleted, we simply mark it as true and then take the appropriate action in our app, right? So our app's logic is going to, take into account this field here, right? So if I come back over here and I change these to false, we're going to be seeing a bunch of other emails here that we weren't seeing before, right? So if I mark this as false, now we don't have any deleted messages. And if I reload this page here, you can see that we have several more emails that we weren't seeing before, like this thank you email here that we can delete again. So if we don't do anything here, it is gone permanently. Okay, so if we come back over here, you can see that now it's marked as true, meaning deleted, but it's still not permanently deleted. Now, this soft delete technique may seem very, very simple at its surface, but it's actually a lot more powerful because you can do so many interesting things that you couldn't have done otherwise. So this flow here, where we have this undo mechanism, can only be done with a soft delete. If we are deleting something permanently, well, it's gone. We can't really bring it back to life. But if we are simply marking a field for that record as though it's deleted or at least marked for deletion, we can simply bring it back by toggling the field. Another interesting thing that you can do is you can present a screen to the user where they can delete things, and you can simply, display all the items except the items that were deleted, giving them the effect that they are actually deleting items. But then you may also have an admin screen that will display all the things as well as some of the things that have been deleted for the users. And that way an admin can see whether some things have been deleted, and an admin can permanently delete it, or they can undelete it if they want to. And again, that is not something that you can do if you're permanently deleting stuff. And so this soft delete is very, very powerful, but also very, very versatile for all kinds of different techniques, ranging from undo to admin boards to whatever you want, because it provides you with greater flexibility since you have that data, because it was never deleted in the first place. And so to quickly show you how this is implemented, let's go ahead and jump back into Flutterflow so that you can see how this is done. So this is my first tab here, and we are displaying a list view from our Supabase, right? So very, very simple, except we have a filter that guarantees that we are only displaying items where deleted is equal to false. So we're not going to be displaying items where deleted is equal to true. And the next thing that we have here is we have a flow. So if they click here, we have 6 actions here. We have a bunch of things. And so the first thing that we're doing is we're setting deleted to true. We are refreshing the database request, which means it's going to rebuild this list view here. We are also updating page state, and that is because we need to know, what was the row that has been marked for deletion in case we need to do something with it, right? And this is this deleted row. We're essentially setting it to deleted row, this row that was marked for deletion. Next, we are setting the current time, because that is needed in order for us to display that undelete functionality for X amount of seconds. So in our case, it's going to be only 5 seconds. And here we wait for 5 seconds. Okay, we're waiting for 5 seconds. And then we're updating page state where we are resetting this deleted row. Okay, and so if it hasn't been 5 seconds yet, then we are keeping track of the item that's kind of in the flux, the item that has been marked for deletion but hasn't been deleted yet, which is going to be important if the user decides to undo that deletion. Otherwise, if it has been more than 5 seconds, then we basically reset this back to nothing because it's gone, it has been fully deleted. And this undo delete here, right? This is actually a conditional visibility. So if we do not have this deleted row anymore, this is not going to be displayed, which means we won't be able to undelete it. But while it hasn't been 5 seconds yet, we can undelete it by clicking here, and you can take a look at the flow here. And so here, what we're doing is if the user decides to undelete it, we simply update the row. We look up our item here, this ID from this deleted row, which is that row that has been marked for deletion, and we set its deleted flag to false. And here what we're doing is we're resetting deleted row. Basically, we're deleting it. And last but not least, we are refreshing the database request so that that item that has been marked for deletion is back in the list. And that way the user can see that they've successfully undid that deletion. And that is how we are showing this kind of technique here, this flow. And remember, this technique, this flow can be used for just about anything. It does not need to be used specifically for this. You can use it in all kinds of different scenarios. Now, the next technique that I want to share with you really doesn't need any introduction. This technique is called real-time collaboration. And this is a situation where if you're doing something, you can collaborate with someone else and work together. So here we have an editor where if I'm editing something and another user is also editing it, we'll be able to see each other's edits, okay? And you got to agree that this is a very, very powerful technique. It's also a very, very flexible technique because you don't need to use it just in this editor. You can use it in all kinds of apps where you're doing some kind of work and you want to share what you've been doing with other people. Okay, so this is another very, very powerful technique. Now, the best way to demonstrate how this works would be to run this exact app in an Android simulator, and not only have a one Android simulator, but actually have multiple of them, so that you can see how, if you have multiple people using this app, how their, sharing and collaboration is going to work together. So I went ahead and downloaded the code for this app onto my computer, and you can simply do that by clicking here and executing this command. Another thing that you can do is you can actually run the whole app using Flutterflow local run. So you can simply follow the instructions here and you'll be able to execute your app locally in a simulator, exactly what I have here. And so now let's come over here and let's go ahead and execute this app in each one of the simulators, so that we have two instances running side by side. All right, so here I have the app running in two different Android simulators. Okay, so if we come over here to the second tab, this is our real-time collab here, and this is our real-time collab here. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna edit something out. I'm gonna go ahead and delete all this so that we have a blank screen. Okay, so now I've deleted it. And now, as you can see, this is also deleted as well. So let's go ahead and start something new. Hey, James, how is it going? Okay. So something like this, and now it says the same thing here, okay? So we can keep going. What's new in the upcoming, something like this, and we do that. And I can also delete that if I want, and that's going to be deleted here as well. Okay, so this is a very simple example of a real-time collaboration that we have implemented using this specific widget called a quill widget that I talked about in some of the previous videos. But now everything that happens on one of these screens is mirrored on the other. And I can do the same thing here. So for instance, let's say I come back here and I delete this right here, just leave it with Hey James. That's going to reflect it as well. And obviously you can take it a lot further, right? You can have the other person's changes be displayed in a different color, maybe bolded, maybe italic. All of that is very, very simple to do because we have the main logic already implemented thanks to our Supabase database. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into Flutterflow so that I can explain to you how I've implemented all of this. Okay, so here we are back in our app. And if we go here to the second tab, this is our real-time call app. And I'm using a custom widget here, this editor widget. And if we jump over here, you can see this is the widget right here. And we are using this quill, this Flutter quill that I talked about in one of the previous videos. And this is a special widget that gives you all kinds of interesting rich text functionality, right? So it's not just entering text. You can do bullet points, you can do checkboxes, you can do bold, italics, font size, different fonts, etc., etc. It's a very, very cool widget. Now we are using Supabase here, right? So if I jump into Supabase right here, we are using this table here, editor data here, right? And we're only using one table with one row for this demo here. Of course, if you have multiple collabs going, you're going to have multiple tables. You might also have the name of the user that, are participating in that collab there. But for the purpose of this kind of tutorial, this proof of concept app, we only have one table with one row that we're using. Okay, and this is actually the text here. Okay, so there's like a JSON, says insert, and this is the contents of our editor, right? This /n or \n/n/n. This is a carriage return, right? This is just an enter, right? So it's an empty line. It's a new line, essentially. The best way of kind of explaining it. So we have two new lines, actually three new lines, then hey, James, and then a bunch of other new lines, okay? So we have some spacing before the text, and then a bunch of other spacing after the text, okay? And so all of this is saved here. And so this is our kind of backend, very, very simple, but we have real time turned on. And what this means is that anytime anything is changed here, Supabase is going to be sending events to any of the subscribers that are listening. And so that is the first thing that we need to do is we need to subscribe to changes, okay? So here we have this custom action that I have that is not, is not outputting anything, but essentially it's listening on this table called editor data that I just talked about, that I just showed you. And it's basically listening for, new data or updated data on this data column. Okay, so it's the same, exactly what I just showed you, right? So if we jump back over here, editor data, and this is this data column here. And as soon as it gets new data, it sets it to app state. And when I say new data, I'm talking about any time the editor state is changed, right? So somebody edits it, adds something, types something, deletes it, rearranges it. Any of that happens, this thing is going to get triggered and we set it to editor state. And then this thing here simply rebuilds the widget anytime the data that it depends on changes, right? So this is also very, very important. This is something that I talked about in one of the previous videos as well. So if you've been watching my channel for a while, you may have seen me kind of discuss this already. Okay, so this here essentially listens for the data and sets it as an app state. Now, once you have this custom action, you need to make sure that it's actually part of the app. And what I basically did is in our custom file, this main.dart, I basically added it as a final action. Okay, the subscribe to changes, which I talked about here. And that way, whenever our app loads, we are automatically listening for changes, which is important because if you don't do that, then you're never going to be listening for changes and you're never going to be able to react on new data. Okay. So now let's talk about this editor widget here. So this editor widget is actually very, very simple. It uses this quill toolbar and this quill editor, and I actually talked about this widget in one of the previous videos again. So simply go back a couple of videos before this one and you're going to find this video. And so what we're doing here is we are tracking for changes, right? So I have here a controller that listens for different changes. There are two things that we need to do. If the editor has been changed, we need to let the app know so that we can update the database. And then when the database is updated, we get these events being sent to all the other clients. And that is how you have this collaboration, okay? So here we are basically listening for changes, and we have this function here, and we also have this onChange handler, okay? So this onChange here, and this is a callback, okay? This is a callback. Right here it's defined, okay? And it's up to us what we want to do if something has changed. And in our case, we want to write to the database, okay? Because as soon as we write to the database is going to send out the new document contents, right? The new data to all the clients that are subscribed to it, okay? If you come over here and we select this widget, we can set this onChange flow here. So I'm gonna open this up and we only have one action, which is an update row. We're basically updating the table with the new data, right? So that's all I'm doing. I'm basically updating this data with the input. And the input is our basically the callback here, right? This is this action parameter. Okay, basically, if we take a look here, we have callback parameters. One of them is input, and this is the parameter that's part of the callback from our custom widget. Okay, so anytime something changes, it executes it, but also passes the data, and that contains all the new data. And so that is all that we're doing. We're simply updating the database. And because we have real-time subscriptions, the database automatically sends all the stuff to all the users. And so if you're looking to kind of build upon this, you want to change how some of the the other users data is showing up. Whenever you're getting back the data, you can differentiate it based on who actually sent it and format it in kind of a specific way or do something else. It's really up to you how far you want to take it. But the key here is understanding that on one hand, we are monitoring the editor and seeing if the data changes. Because as soon as it changes, we gotta send the data to the database, because that's where all the logic and all the magic is happening with that real-time subscriptions. Okay, because if we don't have that real-time subscriptions, we won't be able to have, real-time events, right? Real-time actions as soon as the data changes. And in our case, we have this really, really nice flow, right? So for instance, I can type something else, I can, mess around, and I know this is also going to be updated to exactly the same thing, thanks to Supabase's real-time functionality. The next technique that I want to show you is a technique that's extremely, extremely powerful, and I'm sure many of you would love to have this in your applications. And that is data versioning. So we are back to our familiar editor view, and I have some text here. And so what I can do is I can go ahead and edit it. I can say, hey, so this is what I decided to be the final version. And if I like what I'm seeing, I'm gonna hit save. And what I've just done is I created a new snapshot. Okay, snapshot has been saved. I'm gonna click OK. And if I come over here, I can see that I have a bunch of snapshots. Now, this is the last snapshot. This is snapshot 9. So if I select this, nothing happens. But I had previous snapshots, right? So if I go to snapshot 8, I have this snapshot here. If I come over here, I have snapshot 7. So I have a bunch of other snapshots. Now, let's say I decide that, hey, I want to add some more stuff. I want to add some more text because I realized I forgot to add it previously. Okay, so something like this, and I'm going to save another one. Snapshot has been saved. Come back over here, and now it's 10. Okay, so now this is the last snapshot, and I can select 9, and this is the previous snapshot. Okay, and again, I have other snapshots here as well, just to show you on some of the things that I was working on, et cetera, et cetera. And so data versioning or snapshots is also a very, very powerful feature because it allows your users to not worry too much if they make a mistake, if they mess something up, because regardless of what kind of app you're building, having this ability is super powerful. I mean, after all, Flutterflow itself has this functionality, right? So if you come over here, you have project history, you have these versions, but you also have automatic snapshots. I mean, take a look at all of these snapshots that were done as part of this app here. Take a look at how long I've been working on this demo here, and take a look at all of these snapshots here. And now snapshots are automatic in Flutterflow, versions are manual. So if I want, I can create another version here. And so in our case, we have essentially versions in our case, right? Because these are manual, but you can create them how you want them, right? You can leave versions for kind of this manual functionality, and you can have snapshots to be automatic. You can have them, be created in the back end. And so that way you can have your cake and eat it too. And so once again, this is a very, very versatile, but also a very powerful and practical feature that, pretty much all kinds of apps can leverage, right? So if you're building any kind of a productivity app, some kind of a, an office type app, some kind of a, an app that lets users create content, write reports, work with a spreadsheet, presentations, et cetera, et cetera. Chances are you want to have some kind of versioning or snapshots, and you can use some of the techniques that I use to build this app here to do the same. So now let's go ahead and jump back into Flutterflow so that I can show you how I built it. Okay, so if you jump over here, this is this third demo here. We have this editor widget here still, but a lot of the magic happens here, okay? So the first thing that we're doing is we need to create a table in our Supabase that will actually store these snapshots. Okay, so if I jump back over here and we come into this versions table, you're going to see that we have a table here that has the version ID, the created ad, the user as well as the actual snapshot here. And so this thing here, this drop down, right? Essentially what it's doing is it's loading the snapshots. Okay, so with this drop down selected, if you go to the backend query, you can see that essentially what we're doing is we're loading all the stuff from versions and we're just sorting it by ID increasing order. Okay, and we also have a logic flow, right? So when we select it, right, we're doing a backend query, right? So on selected, once we select it, we want to load that specific snapshot. And so here what we're doing is we're simply pulling up the currently selected snapshot. So, if I selected 1, it's going to pull up the snapshot with ID of 1. If I selected 5, it's going to pull the snapshot with ID of 5, etc., etc. And once we pull the data, we need to set the app state. Okay, why do we need to set the app state? Because we need to rebuild this whole thing so that is displayed inside of this widget. Okay, and so if we select this widget here, this widget accepts something called initial text, which is the app state. And so as long as we change the app state, it's going to rebuild and it's going to display the right text that we passed it. Now, this widget has an on change, like we've talked about previously. And so anytime you change the data, we're simply changing the page state here. And so that way, whenever we select a different snapshot, we have the data from the database. All we need to do is set it to this editor widget, and that will display the data automatically. Now, for the save part here, if we come over here, we open this up, what we're doing is we're simply inserting a new row with the authenticated user here, the currently logged in user, the snapshot that's inside of that widget there. And then we just show an information dialog box telling the user that the snapshot has been saved. And we are also refreshing the database request. So that way our dropdown is refreshed. And that way our dropdown has that newly created snapshot as part of its options that are displayed whenever you click on this. Okay, and that gives you this really, really nice versioning functionality to our this quill editor widget here. And just like how I mentioned previously, this is not just about having snapshots in an editor, right? This is about having snapshots in your app, right? Tracking everything regardless what the user is doing. So if they're working with a spreadsheet, you can create snapshots of their work. If they're using, a tool such as Flutterflow where they're writing code, well, you can also create snapshots as well. If they're writing a letter using this editor here or a similar editor, then, you can simply, create snapshots of the contents of their editor screen there. Okay, so this is extremely flexible, extremely powerful, but also extremely practical because pretty much any kind of app that you want to build, you need to have snapshots, versioning. It's very, very uh, powerful, but it's also something that the users expect. And so definitely consider implementing something like this in your apps as well. Last but not least, I want to show you another very, very common scenario that you may want to have implemented in your apps. And this is an audit trail. So what exactly is an audit trail? Well, an audit trail gives you a history on a specific piece of data. Okay, so as an example, here I have a view of different employees. And for each employee, I have their department, their experience, and their salary here, right? So something like this would not be probably available to everybody or to all the employees. This is something that will only be available to admins, right? So somebody with permissions. But in addition to viewing this data, I can also modify it, right? So this Alice Johnson, I can switch it from IT to HR. I can come over here and I can make this change. I can also change them to, let's say Alice Johnson is not a beginner, but a junior. And let's say the salary is not 75,000, it's actually 125,000. Well, anytime somebody makes these changes, it's very, very helpful to automatically keep track of what's happening, okay? Without worrying about, what the data is or, how these changes are stored. I just want to see a, time by time, kind of this timeline of all the changes and especially who made these changes. Well, thankfully with Supabase, this is also very, very easy to do. So we just made a bunch of changes here, and these changes were tracked. So if we come back over here, we have employees here. This is our employees table, but we also have something called an employees audit trail. So if we open it up, as you can see, we have 3 rows, and these are the 3 changes. Okay, so it says here field change department from IT to HR, position beginner to junior, salary 75,000 to 125,000. Okay, and it also tells us changed by, right? Who it was the user that changed it, and this is actually a user ID of the logged in user here, so we're able to track that as well. So let me go ahead and change a couple of other things. So let's say I change this person here, HR, beginner, and I demote them to $50,000. I come back over here and we're going to be seeing more records, right? So now we see I'm still the same user. Department went from exec to HR, pro to beginner. Salary went from 125,000 to 50,000, right? And this is done automatically in the backend. Okay, so there are 2 pieces here that are happening. The first is we have this UI here. Okay, so let me show you how this is implemented. Okay, so if we jump over here, this is this last example here, and this is kind of what we have. We have a list view, and then inside the list view, we just have a row that will be repeated the number of times that is being fed into the list view. Now, for this list view, this is actually a backend query of the employees table. Okay, so pretty standard. And here we are displaying the actual name, the employee name. But for these drop downs, they need to be as components because there's data that is being read and set, right? Because these data, it's not just read-only data, right? It's not just text data. This is data that we're working with, right? Data that we are manipulating, okay? So for inside both of these components, so for all 3 of these components, we are passing this entire row here. Okay, so that way the component can decide what data it needs. And then for each component, we can simply take a look at this department component. This is basically the component. It just has this drop down here. And remember, it gets this argument, right? So we're giving it that argument. And then what we're doing is we're defining our options. We have this departments, which is a list of strings, a list of departments. And this initial value is this parameter, right? Remember, we passed in a row. And so we're simply looking up the department. That way we can just display the selected field, the selected value in the dropdown to be their current value, their current department, current salary, current experience, etc., etc. And so that is what we're doing here. And if we come over here, we also have an action, right? So this action here means that we're doing something, right? And so in our case, what we need to do is we need to update row employees, and we simply look up the employee ID right here, this matching rows, filter employee ID, because we passed this employee, right, of the current row. So we know the ID. And so we can look up the employee, get the employee, and then set the field, basically modify department to whatever was in the dropdown. So this is pretty standard. And this is exactly how all the other components work. Exactly the same way, right? Here I have it defined here. For the position, I also have them defined right here. But we have this initial value and we have this thing here. Exactly the same thing. We're simply updating the row. And so that is the first part, which is the UI. But we still need that magic that happens in the backend. And that is done thanks to Supabase. And so the first thing that we need to do is we need to create a table in addition to our original data table where we are going to be storing all the changes. And this is this table here called Employees Audit Trail. So now that we have this table, there are still 2 more things that we need to do. First is we need to create a function that will actually insert the records to that second table anytime there's a change made. Okay, and this is this function here. I actually use ChatGPT to do it. And so it's comparing, it's saying, you know, if the old department is distinct, if it has been changed, go ahead and add it here. If the position has been changed, go ahead and add it. And finally, if the salary has been changed, go ahead and update it as well. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to create a trigger that will get triggered anytime there's an update on our original data set, right? On that employee's data set. So anytime there's something has been updated, it's going to go ahead and trigger this function for us. And so this 1-2 punch combination, that gives us this amazing functionality is we have this function that does all the kind of the heavy lifting. And we also have a trigger that gets triggered anytime there is an update on this table here, public employees, which is our main data table. And so this way, doesn't really matter what I'm updating or who is updating. We're going to be tracking that stuff. We're going to be tracking those updates automatically in the other table. So this audit trail is very, very powerful, but also very, very practical, right? So if you want to make sure that you're keeping track of all the changes, anytime your data is manipulated, added, edited, deleted, you can easily do that with Supabase. It makes it super easy and super simple. Now, in this proof of concept app, I've implemented 4 examples, and I actually wanted to implement more, but I decided that 4 is going to be enough because they're kind of meaty. They talk about different things. They're very, very powerful. You can use them in all kinds of applications. And so I felt 4 is going to be enough to show you guys the power of real world applications when using Supabase as your backend. And so the best way to kind of familiarize yourself with these techniques and really get deeper into them and start to leverage them in your apps is to get access to this app, basically view this app as I'm viewing it now on my own computer from the comfort of my own home or office. And you'll be able to do just that when you join our amazing Patreon community. Because as a member of our incredible Patreon community, you'll be able to not just view this app, but you'll also be able to clone this app absolutely free and put some of these techniques that I talk about here to good use in your specific apps with your specific application use cases. But that's not all. Remember, when you join our amazing Patreon community, not only will you get access to just this app, you're going to get access to pretty much all my other apps that I talk about on this channel. They're all there and they're all waiting for you to view and or clone them. Additionally, when you join our incredible Patreon community, you're also going to get access to extra content. So things like Q&As, as well as our Patreon supported masterclass series, where I do deep dives of various topics, apps, tools, ideas that our community wants to know more about. So these are a lot more comprehensive, a lot more involved tutorials that I create exclusively for our Patreon supporters. And so if you want to get access to all of that and also support this channel and support my work, then you definitely owe it to yourself to check out our amazing Patreon community and become a member. And you can do just that by clicking the first link in the description below the video.